Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us for another Q&A session with Maryland gubernatorial candidates. My name is Christopher Ledard, and I'm an associate director of the Maryland Student Coalition, as well as a student at Princeton University. I'm originally from Ellicott City, Maryland, and I will be the moderator for today's event. So as you probably saw, this session is being recorded and the footage will be uploaded online later. So for those of you who do not wish to have your cameras on, you do not have to. And so for those of you watching at home or joining who don't know what MSC is, we are an education advocacy organization, and we push for proactive legislative efforts on the state and local level. So we have over 100 secondary and post-secondary school students in our membership from 16 different Maryland counties. And we advocate for a wide variety of things through policy and legislation. You can find more information regarding our group and the link tree, which will be in the description of this video. So before we begin, I would like to give the opportunity for the rest of the Maryland Student Coalition leadership to introduce themselves.
I can go first. Hi, my name is John DePietro. I'm the director of the Maryland Student Coalition. I'm a current freshman at American University, but I'm originally from Columbia, Maryland. Thank you so much for joining us.
Good to meet you.
Hi, Mr. Barron. My name is Hunter Craig. I'm the Deputy Director of the MSC and a student at Howard Community College. It's a pleasure to have you, and I'm very thankful that you were able to take some time out of your busy schedule to sit down and meet with us.
Good to meet you too.
All right, perfect. So the purpose of this event is to provide students with an opportunity to ask candidates for Maryland governor their stances on various education and youth-related issues. So in MSC, we advocate generally for students' right to free speech, diversity in curriculum, youth voter empowerment, addressing bullying and harassment, and the impacts of COVID-19 on our school system. For this forum, those topics can be a starting point, but we want to welcome you to ask about any educational or otherwise topics of interest to you as a student. So tonight, we are joined by former nonprofit executive John Barron, as well as candidate for governor. Mr. Barron, we'd love for you to introduce yourself.
Good. Do you mind? Can I just go ahead and give like a short overview of what I'm running on? That kind
Absolutely.
of thing, my background and so on.
Absolutely, please do.
It's a pleasure to be here. I really appreciate the invitation. I'll give you a quick overview, and then obviously you guys have a lot of questions. I'm a longtime Maryland resident. I've lived 27 years in Montgomery County. Spent most of my childhood here. I actually live 2 miles down the street from the house where I grew up. I went to the same public schools that my children went to. Reason I'm running for governor is because Maryland can do so much better in 3 areas: education, that's one of my main areas, wages, and healthcare. And I'm the one to get us there, because unlike others, I would expand programs and policies that don't just sound like they're good ideas, but they've been tested in the real world and shown to make a big difference in people's lives. So let me first describe the problem, and then I'll give you a couple examples and then open it up. So in education, the first area I'm focused on, more than a quarter of middle school students in the state of Maryland can't read at a basic level. More than a third can't do basic math. You know what those numbers were 20 years ago? They were the same. Second area, wages and poverty. Poverty rate in Maryland today is 9%. You know what it was in 1995? 9%. Because for low and moderate income Marylanders, they've seen stagnant wages for basically since the 1980s, while income inequality has grown. In the third area, healthcare costs keep rising year after year, squeezing household budgets. The average Maryland family pays 50% more in out-of-pocket medical expenses than they did 10 years ago after adjusting for inflation. In all of the areas I've described, the problems are that much worse for Marylanders of color. It seems like everyone's had a new plan to solve these problems, but it's been decades, and we are still mired in the same problems that are harming the lives of millions. Clearly, we need a very different approach. And that's what I'm offering. So I've been on a mission throughout my career to find effective new ways to solve our toughest challenges. After After serving in the Clinton administration, where I headed a billion-dollar technology program, I founded a nonprofit that pioneered a different way forward, where we rigorously test many solutions and expand those that are most effective. We worked with the Bush and Obama administrations and got some major reforms enacted into law that produced big gains in education, earnings, and healthcare. Most recently, I headed the largest philanthropic initiative in the nation that identifies and expands proven effective social programs. I've been an appointee of Democratic and Republican presidents, and I've twice been confirmed by the Senate. Now it's time to bring this evidence-based approach to Maryland. So, Christopher, when I'm the governor of Maryland, we're going to do what's proven to work. And I'm going to give you a couple examples in education and job training, skill building that are focused and then I'll skip healthcare for the purposes of this conversation. But in education, we are going to expand high quality tutoring to every struggling first and second grader in the entire state, because it's been shown to move them up toward grade level early before their problems become serious in later grades. We're going to do it by engaging the community, including retirees and recent college graduates, to become tutors for a modest stipend as a public service. The second example, we're going to provide effective job training to every young adult in Maryland who wants to advance. If it's done right, job training can be extremely effective, increasing earnings by 40%, as much as 40% for low-income young adults. But the key is, and some of whom have go to college, some have not. The key is to focus that training on fast-growing industries like IT and healthcare. That's number one. And number two, to work very closely with local employers who provide paid internships to the trainees. So under my plan, the state's going to pay for the training, the businesses pay for the internships, the economy gets skilled workers, everyone benefits from this. So those are just two examples of what I would do as governor. The key theme is this, that if we simply continue on our current course, we're going to be here in another 20 years. Nothing will have changed. To make progress, we have to zero in on solutions that have been tested in the real world and shown effective. That's why I'm running for governor. Let's do what works.
All right, thank you, Mr. Barron. So the way that this event will run is very simple. Once we begin the Q&A, each attendee will have the chance to ask questions regarding education or other interests directly to Mr. Barron. We ask that the candidate respond in 1 to 3 minutes, just so we have enough time for all the questions. And we will start with questions from our senior associates and associates, and then if time pertains, we'll open the floor for discussion of any topic from any of the attendees. In order to ensure an orderly flow, I ask that if you have a question, your participant, please click the raise hand button in the lower right corner before you turn on your mic, just so that I can call on you and we'll prevent any interruptions. You're also welcome to put your question in the chat and I will read it off in the order that I see them. So without further ado, let's get into the Q&A. Any questions to begin? Right, let's start with John.
Hello, I just want to start by thanking you once again for meeting with us. I looked over your platform that you have published on your website, and one of your issues under K through 12 education is promoting the expansion of high quality public charter schools in Maryland. There's many disagreements on whether or not charter schools or public schools should be prioritized. Would your administration prioritize putting funding into fixing the charter school system before fixing the public school system, or what would your goals be?
When it comes to charter schools, there are certain types of charter schools that are very effective. The evidence suggests, actually, on balance, charter schools on average are no more effective, no less effective than regular public schools. But there are certain types of charter schools that are very effective. One of them is KIPP charter schools. Now, I want to make an important point here. This is a public charter school. It's a type of public, so this is a public school. In Maryland, it is also unionized teachers. There was one of the initiatives that I worked on, my organization worked on closely with the Obama administration, was we got enacted into a law, a program that awarded funds. It was a $150 million a year program. It still exists, that awards funds to expand high quality, proven effective educational interventions. One of them is KIPP charter schools. Okay, so that's the one we're talking about here. And there was a requirement not only that it get expanded, but that a large national evaluation, a randomized evaluation, was done, a gold standard study. It found that KIPP charter schools increased school-wide reading and math achievement by 5 to 10 percentile points for very low income students, almost all of whom were of color. And many years later, it increased college enrollment and college going by about 6 percentage points. So that particular form of charter school is very effective. Under my plan, we would expand the proven effective charter schools, not other types of charter schools. Again, it's consistent with the theme of my campaign. Let's do what works.
All right, thank you. Now we'll transition to Hunter.
Thank you. So, Mr. Barron, could you speak a little bit more to your accomplishments in the presidential administrations when it comes to passing or getting education policy through?
Yes. So my first experience in government, well, I was a congressional staffer for many years. I got some legislation enacted there, but in a completely different area, high-tech economic development. And in the Clinton administration, I headed a $1 billion technology program that funded small technology companies to develop new technologies. I won awards for reinventing government, and some of our reforms were cited as some of the main achievements of the Clinton administration. They touted them as some of the main achievements. I got involved in education policy, and I served on, that's where I was twice appointed by the president to serve on the National Board for Education Sciences. This was after the Clinton administration. I was appointed by President Bush to serve on the National Board for Education Sciences, which oversees the research arm of the Education Department. At the same time, and the reason I was appointed, and I chaired that board, at the same time, I had founded a nonprofit called the Coalition for Evidence-Based Policy. And we worked with primarily with the Bush administration, but primarily with the Obama administration to get a number of major reforms enacted into law. There were two in particular. One was this $150 million program. It was called the Investing in Innovation Fund. It was later renamed and reauthorized with bipartisan support. I testified on behalf of that as the Education, Innovation, and Research Program. I think it's still like $150 million, maybe $200 million a year. It is very different than the usual kind of federal program because it awards grants to states and localities. The largest grants go to programs like KIPP charter schools or one-on-one tutoring that have strong evidence of effectiveness. Then there are smaller grants that go to promising programs with a requirement for an evaluation to see whether they work too. And if they do, then they can qualify for the big grants. So unlike normal federal spending, evidence about what actually works plays a central role in how funds are given out under this program. And there are and it was very successful. The other piece I want to also mention that in Build Back Better, the pending bill, if it passes, there is a very similar program to this where, again, we authored the key evidence provisions in it. It has the same structure focused on post-secondary education. It's called Completion and Retention and Completion Grants. If enacted, it would be a $9 billion program, very sizable, again, with this evidence structure. Those are two examples.
Thank you.
All right, great. So I have a question. This question actually came in from our Instagram story a couple of days back. And you kind of already touched on this, but you have a little more information. Why did you join the race for governor specifically?
Because we are not making progress on big, long-standing issues in Maryland. I gave examples before, but you know what? If you go back to 20, 25 years, roll the tape back to the 1990s, you guys were probably pretty young back then. So I was younger. The gubernatorial elections back then, you know what they're talking about? They're talking about the urgent need to improve schools in Maryland. They're talking, especially in Baltimore. They're talking about gun violence and public safety. They're talking about, then it was the cocaine epidemic. Now it's the opioid epidemic. You get a sense as though we're just on some of these long-standing social problems, we are just not making progress. Now, I had been and the reason I believe I offer a path forward to start making progress. What I'm offering is very different than every other candidate. We all want to improve the schools. We all want to give kids, youth, the skills they need to succeed in the workforce. We all want to solve these other problems. The way that I'm different, and the thing that I offer that is unique in this governor's race, is that I recognize that to achieve those goals, it is not enough to simply roll out yet another unproven plan or program. However well-intentioned, many programs just don't work. We've seen that again and again when the results are actually measured. So if we're going to make progress, we have to zero in on solutions that have been tested in the real world and shown effective, like the ones I've described. Otherwise, we're just spinning wheels, and we're going to be here in another 20 years, as I said, with more gray hair and nothing, and we'll be talking about the same damn problems. That's the reason I got into this race. What I'm offering is something fundamentally different from the other candidates. It is a new governing approach in Maryland based on evidence about what actually works. To make that kind of change requires leadership from the top. It requires a governor.
Thank you very much. So one question we have coming in as well is in regards to this idea of local control. So a lot of the stuff we do in Maryland Student Coalition is a lot of education policy based. And so there's sometimes some tension between like the state's authorities in terms of education in relation to like county boards of education and county governments in general. So how, as governor, will you kind of reconcile those two responsibilities and make sure that counties are able to exercise their rights to govern themselves, but that no jurisdictions are able to necessarily lag behind or push against needed reforms?
It needs to be a partnership between the states and localities. That's the only way things can really get done. If it's just an edict coming down from the state, to the localities, you're going to spend the money that comes from the state in education this way. It's not going to be effective because ultimately you need localities to understand and be engaged in it. So the way that, but it's very important whether it's done through the state or localities or actually in partnership, that the funds, that education funds in Maryland are focused on programs and policies that will actually move the needle on reading and math achievement and high school graduation rates, and ultimately, college and wages and all of that. They need to be effective. So the way that this partnership would work, and the way it has worked in other contexts that I've worked in, most of that is the interface between federal and state governments, is that when money is allocated for education to the states, to the localities, money from the state government to localities, we will include incentives for localities to adopt some of like additional funding for them to adopt some of the proven approaches like one-on-one tutoring that I've described in the early grades, or career academies is another example, or KIPP public charter schools. There are a number of examples there's, they get additional funding, also technical assistance to help ensure, to help them to implement those effectively. And it would be an iterative conversation. The other thing is often some of the best ideas come from localities, not from the state. So we would encourage states, localities also to innovate. The state would then have a role in testing whether those innovations at the local level are effective and should be expanded elsewhere, or whether they're not and should be revised and retested, or the people should move on to something else. So it would be a partnership in both using evidence and building evidence.
All right, thank you very much. Now we'll go to John.
Whoa. As gubernatorial elections have started to become much more competitive and a lot more nationalized, put on a national platform, if you do get the Democratic nomination and you go to a competitive general election, what do you plan on doing to get some excitement behind your campaign?
Are you kidding me? What are you telling me? I'm not exciting enough? It's a good. Here's also a way in which I think I would be different than other candidates, or many of the other candidates. I think what happened in Virginia is a lesson. You can't just run in a general election against Donald Trump. That didn't work in Virginia. It probably wouldn't work in Maryland. You need a positive agenda. My approach is one that I will resonate not just with Democrats, but with independents and Republicans across the spectrum. And that may be especially important in 2022 because it could be a tough year for Democrats. My message basically is I'm not advocating for a big increase in state spending. I am advocating for a big increase in the effectiveness of state spending. And that is a message that can appeal across the spectrum, including to moderate Republicans. That is the message basically of my career, where I led a movement. It basically my organization sparked a movement to increase the effectiveness of government through evidence about what actually works to improve people's lives. It was a message and an approach, that whatever the money the government is spending should be spent on programs and policies that actually deliver the results and improve people's lives. That's something that appealed to folks in the Bush administration, in the Obama administration, and in Republican and Democratic Congresses. I think in the electorate, it would resonate with across the political spectrum.
All right, thank you. I see we have some people that have joined us midway through. Just a reminder, if you would like to ask a question of Mr. Barron, feel free to raise your hand using the raise hand function, or to drop it in the chat, and I will get to you in order. So next we'll be going to Hunter.
Thank you. So this one actually comes through a direct message. So some issues are deeper than years. Some issues are deeper than years, such as systematic. For example, schools in Maryland teach the Common Core curriculum. However, there is research to show that curriculums vary and can be problematic. This person is curious, do you view reform as an issue of working with that system already existing, even though they may have problems, or shaping the ideals of an educated society, even when that goal may mean scraping and starting over from systems that may not work anymore? So in short, do you envision a fresh start to systematic problems, or do you envision changing, fixing what we currently have?
In one sense, it is fixing what we currently have, meaning, as I described earlier, there are certain programs and policies in education that have been tested and shown to make a big difference. I gave some in K-12 education. Let me give you one in post-secondary education, but this one also is in the nature of sort of fixing. For low-income first generation, this is a program called Bottom Line. It operates in the Northeast, and it's basically what it does. It is for low-income first generation college students. Parents have not gone to college, but they're pretty good students in high school. They've got at least a 2.5 GPA. It provides them with advice. There's advisors, trained advisors on the college application and selection process so that they can navigate that and also select a college that isn't going to leave them with huge loans and that they're likely to be successful at. And the advising continues throughout college on problem solving of juggling work and school and all of that. It was shown in really in a definitive study to increase the rate of bachelor degree completion for these low-income students by 8 percentage points. That was sort of a blockbuster. That's a very large effect and very large improvement in people's lives. It's not a huge change in the education system, but it has a big effect. So a lot of these that I'm talking about are in the nature of important modifications of the current system that have been tested and shown to make a big difference. The thing that would be very different is how the state government operates, because right now, as the state allocates money to localities in Maryland, evidence about what actually works plays very little role. What I want to do, what I want to do is to reinvent that process so that evidence about what actually works plays a central role in that funding allocation process. So in the context of all of state government, this would be a major transformation.
Thank you.
Thank you. So for our next question coming in, we wanted to ask, as we know, like there's going to be a lot of effort put into COVID-19 recovery. There already is, and it's going to continue for years to come. So how do you see education fitting into your plan for recovery, and what steps will you take as governor to address that?
Two items I would mention here. Number one, I've called for, and I was the first candidate to call for vaccine requirements for all school staff, educators and staff, and for students 16 and older for whom the FDA has given full approval. That is the reason is we have the solution to this whole pandemic. We have it at our fingertips. Vaccines have been shown to be highly effective, as you probably know, in preventing serious illness and death. Unvaccinated youth are 10 times as likely to be hospitalized or to die from COVID than vaccinated youth. So just like in the same way that we require vaccines for measles and polio, we should be requiring vaccines for students age 16 plus, and also for school staff, among other things, that protect students who aren't yet old enough to be vaccinated or haven't yet gotten a vaccine. This is just common sense, and it's no big departure from the past. This is the answer to getting kids back into the classrooms for good. Okay, we have the answer, we just need to use it. I get exasperated talking about this, but we need those requirements. Number two, the tutoring that I proposed is important in any circumstance, even without COVID. It is especially important with COVID, because it is, especially in the early grades for kids who've been out of school and have suffered learning loss, it is the most effective way that's been tested and shown to reverse that learning loss and move them back up toward where they should be. So I had a Baltimore Sun article on that, ways of addressing COVID learning loss. A lot of other folks have, it's not my original idea, this whole thing, but this is what we should be doing for every struggling first and second grader in the early grades, and maybe if the money's available in other grades as well.
Perfect. Thank you very much. So we're going to transition to our last question, and it comes through the chat, and I'll try to read it quickly. Overwhelming evidence shows a 48-fold increase in the past 20 years for pesticide toxicity to human health and for thousands of species, including pollinators. Currently, the Maryland Department of Agriculture controls all decisions on more than 14,000 pesticide products it allows in the state, but this department has no public health or environmental expertise. Would you support adding expert input by the Departments of Health and Environment to the Department of Agriculture's decision on use of pesticides of concern and possible added protections in the state?
Short answer to the question is yes. I think one thing that's very important, and that would be a hallmark of, well, it's a hallmark of, when I ran a $1 billion program at the Department of Defense in the Clinton administration, there are a lot of moving parts in a program, and people have expertise in one area, not another. It is very important to share the knowledge and to tap expertise wherever it exists, because otherwise people are sort of focused on their particular silo and their issues and so on. So a hallmark of my administration would be to foster that kind of interagency collaboration, so that the expertise in the Department of Health, for instance, is brought to bear in the Department of Agriculture. That kind of cross-agency collaboration is extremely important, and the way that it occurs is by having a leader who understands it, understands the importance of that, and convenes the key people and understands where the gaps are and things aren't being, where there's a special need for it, and brings in people across the government and outside the government that have the relevant expertise.
All right, thank you very much. So at this time, we are drawing down on our time. So we want to move into closing up. So I would like to thank everyone for the great questions, very engaging dialogue. I learned a lot and was glad to be here today. And I also want to thank Mr. Barron for taking the time to meet with us today. So now, Mr. Barron, at this time, do you have any final comments?
I do. I have a question. You've met with all, I'm the last one. You've met with all the other Democrats who are running, and have you met with the Republicans? Just out of curiosity.
So we've extended invitations. We've not yet met with any of the Republican primary candidates. And I believe this is the final Democratic gubernatorial candidates. There might be a few that were not responsive to our invitation, but we've covered the majority, at least.
Good, good, good. So in other words, you're ending on a high note. Is that, if I could just, make that inference. It's been a pleasure to be here. I have enjoyed talking with you, and I hope to do it again. I hope to stay in touch with you guys. If anyone is interested in, helping out on our campaign or just learning more, please visit our website. I think my colleague put information into the chat. Did he?
Yep.
Yeah, if you'd like to learn more, volunteer, whatever, www.johnbarron.com. Thanks for the opportunity. It was great to be here.
All right, thank you so much. So thanks so much once again. The Maryland Student Coalition, we do have to have a few more Q&As during the months of December and early January. As you may know, the primary is coming up in June of next year, so we have a little bit of time, hopefully before the start of legislative session, to get a few more Q&As in. But for now, this does conclude our Q&A series. We hope that these sessions have been informative for those seeking to learn more about candidates' education platforms and otherwise kind of their policy ideas. And we hope it's been engaging for the students who have joined us. So more information on future events will be sent out via email. And if you're interested in receiving those updates, if you're not on the email list, if you're not sure if you're on the email list, you can access that through the link tree, which will be in the description of this video. So with that, that's a wrap. Have a great day, everyone, and stay safe.